They sat next to each other for years, but only spoke once. He never missed the 7:10 bus. 4 years running, always the same coat, same flat cap, same quiet climb up the steps without looking at anyone. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you love meaningful stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I really enjoy seeing where these stories travel. His name was Frank Dalton. He didn't carry much, just a folded newspaper tucked under one arm, a small thermos of black coffee, and the way older men carry time, slow, steady, as if it might spill if you rushed it. He wasn't going anywhere in particular. Hadn't been for a while. His doctor appointments were on Thursdays, but even when he didn't have one, he still rode. It was just what he did. He didn't tell anyone why. The driver knew him by name. "Morning, Frank," he'd say. Frank would nod. That was about it. He always sat in the far back, right-hand side, 3 seats from the rear exit. He liked the window, never opened it, just looked out, quiet, still. At the third stop, 2 neighborhoods down, she got on. She wore blue scrubs and carried a plain brown bag. Her name tag was clipped to the front pocket, but too far to read. Her hair was always tied back. Tired eyes. No makeup. No smile. She moved fast, but not rushed. Like someone who was used to time being short. She never looked at Frank. He never looked at her. But she always sat in the same spot. Left side of the same back bench. Parallel lines. Same ride. Never crossing. 4 years. Sometimes other passengers sat between them. Sometimes the bench was just theirs. But it didn't matter. They never spoke. Not once. Frank didn't wonder about her. Not out loud. He noticed she got off downtown near the hospital. She'd pull the cord, stand, and steady herself with one hand on the rail. She never looked back. She never noticed that he watched her leave. Just for a second. Then back to the window. They were like clock hands stuck in place. Morning after morning. Summer through winter. Some days it rained. They didn't change. Some days the driver played music low. Some days the heater clicked and rattled. Some days the seat felt colder than others. Frank didn't shift much. Didn't fidget. Just held the newspaper. Sometimes opened it. Mostly didn't. He'd been a warehouse foreman once, 37 years, retired after his knees gave out. Wife passed in '08. No kids. Lived 2 blocks from the old fire station. People in town knew him, sort of. The kind of knowing that stops at the grocery store aisle with a nod. Never a full conversation. Just, "Hey, Frank, how you holding up?" He liked that. He didn't want more. She never smiled. Not once in 4 years. Not at the driver. Not at other passengers. Not at her phone. She'd sit down, press her knees together, hands in her lap. She'd blink slow, like she was sorting through heavy thoughts. Her phone stayed in her bag. One morning someone new sat in her spot. A tourist, maybe. Didn't know. She paused in the aisle, looked toward the seat, and for just a second, looked at Frank. He met her eyes. Just that once. She sat a row ahead, didn't look back. He didn't look again. But he noticed something strange, that for the rest of the ride, his hand stayed clenched. Not tight, just aware. It passed. The next morning she was back in her spot, the balance restored. They sat like that through the seasons. Holidays came and went. Time passed in quiet ways. Frank grew slower getting on. She added a new bag to her shoulder. Maybe extra work. Maybe not. No one else noticed. But they did, even if they never said a word. Frank didn't have a reason to ride the bus. Not anymore. But reasons stop mattering after a while. Habits don't need them. He'd wake at 6, Shave carefully even though no one noticed. Make toast he barely touched. Pour coffee into the same scratched thermos. Then sit at the kitchen table until the clock hit 7 o'clock. Not a minute before, not a minute after. The walk to the stop was quiet. Past 3 houses with the same yards as yesterday. A cracked sidewalk that never got fixed. A small church with the sign out front that changed Bible verses once a week. He never missed. The bus was never full at that hour. Most days the same faces. A man in construction boots. A woman with a worn red purse. A college kid with headphones and a tired hoodie. And Ruth. He didn't know her name, but that's what it was. Ruth. She got on at 7:16. Frank checked his watch every morning. She was always right on time. Same seat. Left side of the back bench. Always alone. Frank never thought much about it in the early days. She was just someone who shared the ride. Like a tree you pass on a walk. There. Reliable. Familiar. But after a year, he started to notice little things. The way her shoulders sagged just slightly. The way her eyes moved but her head never did. Like she was keeping count of things only she could see. She smelled faintly of antiseptic. Her hands had small cracks near the nails. Work hands. He recognized that. Still, no words, no nods, no smiles. Once, someone new sat in her spot. She stood for a second, confused, then sat 1 row forward. Didn't glance back. The next morning, she was back in place. Frank watched it all without moving, without reacting. But something about it stayed in his mind. Routine mattered. His did too. After the final stop, he'd step off, walk past the coffee shop, sit in the park for exactly 20 minutes, then take the same bus home. Same driver if the timing lined up. It wasn't about going somewhere. It was about doing something. People need anchors, things to tie the days together. That bench was his, and hers. They never made eye contact again after that one morning. But something had shifted. Frank noticed her more. He didn't mean to, but he did. She'd sigh sometimes, quietly. He'd hear it and feel a weight he didn't own settle next to him. She blinked slower some days, looked more tired. One morning she rubbed her eyes and leaned back. He wondered if she'd slept, but still no words. A man coughed behind them once, loud, startled her. She jumped just a little. Frank almost turned to ask if she was all right, but he didn't. He didn't know what he'd say, or how. And the moment passed. It always did. Some mornings the bus jolted hard and their arms would bump. She never pulled away, just stayed still. Frank would freeze, then relax. Nothing said, nothing acknowledged. The silence between them wasn't cold. It wasn't hostile. It was just comfortable, like a coat that doesn't fit perfectly but keeps you warm enough. That's what it became. Every morning, 2 people, 2 lives, side by side. Not strangers, but not friends. Something in between, something quiet. And the days went on. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of morning you forget unless something breaks it. The bus was 2 minutes late, which never happened. Frank checked his watch twice, then a third time. No rain, no traffic, just late. He didn't like it. When it finally pulled up, he climbed on and nodded at the driver, sat in his spot. Far back, right-hand side, paper tucked under his arm, thermos on the seat beside him. He stared out the window but didn't see much, just waited. At 7:16 sharp, she got on, like always. Ruth. He still didn't know her name, not really. but it felt wrong to call her anything else in his head. She moved fast, always did. Her shoes were quiet on the floor. She didn't look at him. Never did. She sat down across from him. Same place. Left side. Held her bag tight in her lap. Her coat looked thinner than usual. Weather was turning. Frank looked once, then back to the window. Same as every morning. The ride was smooth for the first few stops. People got on. Got off. A man argued quietly with someone on his phone. 2 kids shared headphones and whispered jokes. Then, just before Ruth's stop, it happened. She stood to leave like she always did, reached for the rail. Her bag slipped. Just a bit. Something slid out. A photograph. It floated down, quiet, soft, like it had weight that wasn't just paper. She didn't see it. She stepped off the bus. Doors closed. The engine pulled away. Frank didn't move for a second. Just looked at the photo on the floor. Then he leaned down, picked it up slow. It was a boy, maybe 10, baseball uniform, dirt on the knees, grinning like he'd just won something. The edges were worn, a crease down the center. This photo had been handled. A lot. Frank didn't know what to do. He held it in his lap, looked at it once more, then tucked it into the back of his paper. All the way to the last stop, he thought about her. He never wondered much about her life. Didn't seem right. But now, this picture, he couldn't stop. Was it her son? Grandson? Nephew? Someone gone? He didn't know. Didn't even know if she'd notice it missing. But something told him she would. When the ride ended, Frank stepped off slower than usual, walked past the coffee shop, sat on the same bench, opened the paper, looked at the picture again. The boy's smile didn't fade, even in the cold light. He didn't sleep much that night. The next morning he was at the stop 10 minutes early, paced once, sat. When the bus came, he got on, nodded at the driver, sat in his usual spot, waited. At 7:16, she boarded. This time Frank didn't look away. When she reached her seat, before she sat, he reached out and held the photo up. "You dropped this yesterday," he said. His voice cracked a little, not from nerves, from disuse. She stopped, looked at the photo, then looked at him. For the first time, really looked. Her eyes widened. Not surprise. Something else. She took the photo from his hand, gently. "Thank you," she said. That was it. The only words they ever exchanged. She sat down, held the photo with both hands, didn't put it away, just looked at it. Quiet. Still. The bus moved on. Frank didn't speak again. Neither did she. But the silence felt different now. Not broken, not uncomfortable, just changed. The next morning, Frank thought maybe she wouldn't get on. He sat on the back bench, same spot, but felt unsettled. The conversation, if you could even call it that, played over in his head. 2 words. "You dropped this." Then thank you. Nothing more. But something had shifted. At 7:16, she stepped onto the bus like she always did. Same scrubs, same tired eyes, same bag. She didn't look at him. She walked straight to her seat, sat down, hands in her lap. The photo wasn't visible. Frank didn't know what he expected. A glance, maybe. A nod. Some sign. There wasn't one. They rode the same way they always had. Same distance apart. Same silence. But now it felt like something had been said and quickly packed away. He looked out the window, watched the traffic, the sidewalk, tried not to glance in her direction. But he noticed more. Her breathing was slower today, not rushed like before. Her hands stayed still, no fiddling with the strap of her bag, no shifting in her seat. She looked forward, not down, not out the window. Frank stayed quiet. The paper in his hand remained folded. His thermos sat untouched. He wanted to ask something about the boy, the game, but it wasn't his place. Whatever he'd opened with that small gesture wasn't an invitation. It was a moment, and it had passed. At her stop, she stood like always, gripped the rail. The bus slowed, the brakes hissed. She stepped off without a word, didn't turn around. Frank watched her go. Something in his chest tightened. She hadn't changed anything in the routine. But now he saw it all differently. The next few mornings were the same. No words, no nod, no photo. He didn't know if she kept it with her or not. But he thought about it. And he thought about her. She was probably 30 years younger. Maybe more. She wore the same brand of sneakers each day. Worn soles, tread faded. He noticed details now that he hadn't before. The faint line across her forehead from a hair tie that stayed too tight. The way she pressed her thumb to the bridge of her nose when the sun came through the window just right. It wasn't infatuation. It wasn't friendship. It was just attention. Frank realized something. They'd sat side by side for years, and yet he hadn't seen her. Not really. And maybe she hadn't seen him either. Until that one moment with the photo. A week passed. Nothing more was said. Frank didn't push, but every morning he unfolded the paper, left the photo tucked inside, just in case. He didn't know what he was waiting for. Maybe nothing. Maybe something. But it was there. He found himself listening more. To the sound of her breathing. To the way she shifted her weight. To the silence they shared. He wasn't sure what it meant. Maybe it didn't mean anything. But it mattered to him. And that was enough. Frank noticed it right away. The bus pulled up, doors opened, and she wasn't there. At first, he thought maybe she was late. Maybe she'd missed the bus by a few seconds. It happens sometimes. People lost track of the time. Shoes got stuck. A stoplight took too long. But as the bus pulled away from her stop, he kept his eyes on the sidewalk. Nothing. Her bench was empty. She never missed. Not once in the years they'd ridden together. The rest of the ride felt longer than usual. Frank didn't open his paper, didn't drink his coffee, just stared straight ahead. He didn't know her name, didn't know her number, couldn't check on her. He didn't even know what hospital she worked at. There were 3 in the area. He told himself not to worry. People miss a day. They get sick. They take time off. Still, something felt off. The next morning, Frank showed up early, sat at the stop, watched the sidewalk. When the bus pulled up, he boarded slower than usual. Looked down the street one more time. She wasn't there. He took his seat in the back. Right side. Same place. Left side stayed empty. Third morning, same thing. Now he knew something was wrong. Frank hadn't spoken to her beyond those 2 words. Didn't know her full story. But he noticed the absence. Not just the seat, the feeling. The quiet between them had always felt familiar, comfortable. But now it was different. Now it felt hollow. He watched the doors at every stop, kept thinking she'd appear, maybe with a new bag, maybe with a bandage, something that would explain it. But no one came. He didn't talk to the driver, didn't ask anyone. He wouldn't know what to say. "Have you seen the woman who always sat near me?" It sounded strange, too small to matter. But it did. By the end of the week, Frank felt a kind of ache he couldn't name. He hadn't realized how much she filled the space until she was gone. At home, he walked slower, forgot where he set things down. He stopped taking the paper, left the thermos in the sink, still rode the bus, still sat in the same place. Her seat stayed empty. Then, on Saturday, he went into the small grocery store near his apartment, picked up bread, soup, crackers, the usual. At the register, a stack of newspapers sat near the lottery tickets. He wasn't going to grab one, but something made him look. In the back pages, tiny print, boxed in by ads, was a name. Frank A. Dalton. He froze. Not his name. Someone else's. Then he looked again. No. It was him. But not in print today. His name wasn't there, but someone else's was. Ruth M. Fletcher. He didn't know it was her, not right away. But the details lined up. Age, 53. Occupation, licensed nurse. Survived by no immediate family listed. Passed away Tuesday morning, peacefully at home. Tuesday. The morning she didn't show up. Frank folded the paper and didn't finish checking out. He walked home slowly, hands shaking a little. Once he got there, he sat at the table and unfolded the obituary again. No photo, no service details, just a notice. He read it 3 times, then folded it again, tucked it into the back of his paper, and sat there, long after the sun had moved across the wall. Frank didn't take the bus the next morning. He woke up at the same time, followed the same routine: toast, coffee, jacket by the door. But when it came time to leave, he didn't. He sat at the table instead. The paper with her obituary lay in front of him, still folded neat. He hadn't touched it since Saturday. He didn't know why he felt it so deeply. He'd barely spoken to her. They'd shared space, not conversation. Shared routine, not memories. But the silence between them had become something. He couldn't define it. He only knew that now, with her gone, it had collapsed into something hollow. Mid-morning, he got up, walked to the corner store, bought a fresh newspaper, didn't really read it. He flipped through until he found the obituary section. Her name was still there. He clipped it out carefully and folded it into his wallet. Not sure why. Just didn't want to throw it away. He didn't know if anyone had gone to her service. He didn't know if there had even been one. The obituary didn't say. No time, no place, no family. That stayed with him. Someone like her, steady, kind, quiet, should have had people around her. Someone to remember her. But the paper had said nothing more than the basics. Her name, her work. One sentence about peace. Frank sat on the couch for a long time that afternoon, staring at nothing in particular. When Monday came, he stood at the bus stop again. Same time, same walk, same cold air. When the bus pulled up, he got on without a word. The driver nodded. Frank nodded back. He took his seat in the back. Right side. No one was in her spot. The left side stayed empty. The bus pulled away. He didn't read the paper, didn't sip the coffee, just sat there, same as before. But everything felt different now. The weight of her absence was quiet, but steady, like a missing coat hook, a chair out of place. He looked straight ahead, not at the seat, not at the people, just ahead. The driver played the radio low, something soft. Frank didn't listen. At her usual stop, he looked up. Just once. No one got on. Doors closed. Bus moved on. Frank didn't expect her to appear. He knew better, but the habit of looking stayed. It was strange, missing someone he never really knew. But he did miss her, and that was the truth. It stayed with him through the whole ride, through every stop, through the last turn. When he got off, he walked past the coffee shop without going in. Went to the park, sat on the bench, pulled the obituary from his wallet, read it again. The print was already fading at the edges. He folded it back up, slowly, and slipped it into his coat pocket. Not his wallet this time. Closer to the heart. Just felt right. Monday came again. It had been 3 weeks since Frank last saw her. The bus stop looked the same. Same cracked sidewalk. Same faint oil stain near the curb. Same quiet air. Frank stepped on, nodded to the driver, and moved to the back without a word. When he reached his seat, he paused. Someone was sitting in her spot. A young man, maybe 25, headphones in, head down. Didn't look up. Didn't seem to notice anything beyond his phone screen. Frank stood there a moment longer than usual. Then he sat down. Same side as always, right corner. But something about it didn't feel right. Her seat had been empty every day since he read the obituary, even when the bus filled up, even when there were only a few seats left. People passed it by. He wondered if it was just coincidence, or if people could feel absence even when they didn't know the reason. He didn't know why it bothered him now. Maybe he'd gotten used to that space being untouched, like it was holding something in place. He didn't say anything, didn't stare, just looked out the window. But his mind stayed on that seat. She used to sit with her hands folded, shoulders forward, always still. She never looked around, never showed emotion. But her presence had been solid, unmistakable. And now that presence was gone. He thought maybe the young man would get off at the next stop. He didn't. Stayed there the whole way. Frank didn't feel angry, just off balance, like something had been moved without warning. The bus rolled on through its route. Same streets, same turns, same faces, but it felt different. He wondered if anyone else noticed. Probably not. She hadn't been loud or memorable to most people. She hadn't made conversation, hadn't drawn attention. But she'd been there. That mattered. At the end of the route, the young man stood and stepped off without a glance. Frank stayed seated a little longer than usual. The left side of the bench was empty again. He looked at it, not for long, but long enough. The spot looked smaller now. He got up, walked off the bus, and followed the same route past the coffee shop. Still didn't go in. He didn't sit in the park that day, just walked home. The folded obituary was still in his coat pocket. He hadn't looked at it since the park. He didn't need to. He remembered every word. And somehow that memory sat with him each time the bus doors opened and she wasn't there. It didn't go away. Frank didn't talk about her to anyone. He wasn't the kind of man who shared much. He never had been. But even if he were, he wouldn't have known what to say. There was no story to tell, no real beginning. Just two people who sat near each other for years and spoke once. But still, every morning, when he climbed onto the bus, he looked at that seat. No one ever sat in it again. Not once in the days that followed. Not even when the bus was nearly full. Somehow it stayed open. Frank didn't know if it was luck or something else, but he noticed it. She had become part of the routine without either of them meaning to, and now her absence was too. The space next to him was a quiet reminder. Some days he caught himself thinking she might be back, just for a second, before reality set in. It wasn't hope, just habit. The mind remembers patterns longer than it should. One morning, a young woman stepped onto the bus, looked around for a seat, paused next to the bench, and kept walking. Frank watched her pass. She had nothing in common with Ruth. Different age, different way of carrying herself. But for a moment, that pause had done something. Then it was gone. He didn't know why he kept riding. There was no real point anymore. No appointments. No reason to be on that route. But he kept showing up. The routine had become something more, a connection to something that didn't quite have a name. At the grocery store, the cashier asked him once how he was doing. He said, "Fine." That was enough. He didn't mention Ruth, didn't mention the empty seat, didn't mention how quiet the mornings felt now. He'd never said her name out loud anyway. Didn't feel right to start. But he thought about her. Every time he sat down. Every time the bus rolled past her stop. Even now, weeks later, he could still picture her standing to leave, bag in hand, eyes tired, shoulders tense. The way she never looked back. He wondered about the photo, the one of the boy. Was it still in her bag when she passed? Did someone find it? Did anyone know who he was? He'd never asked. Never would. But the image stayed with him. Clear as the morning it fell to the floor. He hadn't taken another picture on or off that bus since. Didn't feel right. Some things you just carry in your head. At night, when the apartment was quiet and the city sounds faded, he sometimes replayed that one moment. Her voice, soft but certain. "Thank you." That was all she ever said. And somehow, it was enough. Almost a year had passed. Frank still rode the bus every morning. Same time, same route, same seat. The world had moved on around him. The faces on the bus had changed. Some stayed, some didn't. Drivers came and went. But Frank didn't miss a day. He still checked the left side of the back bench first thing. Her seat. It had stayed empty for months. Then little by little, people started to sit there again. No one stayed long. A man reading a book once, a student with a backpack, a woman who coughed into her phone. No one ever sat there 2 days in a row. Frank didn't think much of it anymore. He still noticed, but it wasn't sharp like it used to be. He had stopped carrying the newspaper, stopped bringing the thermos. He'd sit with his hands folded or resting on his knees. Look out the window. Let the ride pass, like it always had. One Monday morning, it was raining. Hard. He wore a thicker coat, one he hadn't used since last winter. As he left his apartment, he slipped his hand into the pocket and felt something crumpled inside. He pulled it out. The obituary. Folded, worn, edges torn slightly. He hadn't realized he still had it in that coat. He stared at it for a minute, then tucked it back in. Didn't open it. Didn't need to. The rain hit the windows of the bus in steady sheets. People climbed on quickly, hoods up, shoes wet. Frank sat in his usual spot. When they reached her stop, something strange happened. Her seat was taken. A young man, early 20s, had slid into it without hesitation. Probably didn't know anyone used to sit there. Probably didn't care. Frank looked at him, just briefly. The kid nodded politely, then looked down at his phone. Frank didn't nod back. He turned and stared out the window again. But something sat wrong with him. Not because someone had taken the seat. Because for the first time in a year, he didn't feel anything about it. The routine was still there. The memory was still sharp. But the ache had dulled. That surprised him. After the bus reached the end of the line, the rain still coming down hard, Frank stood and moved down the aisle slowly. The driver was new, didn't know his name, didn't nod, just kept looking forward. Frank stepped off and stood under the bus shelter for a while. Didn't move, just listened to the rain hit the pavement. Then, without thinking, he pulled the obituary from his pocket. He held it for a moment, then folded it again, carefully, and slipped it back into the coat. That afternoon, when he rode the bus back, her seat was empty again. He sat on the left side, not on purpose, not as a tribute, just because it was open and he didn't feel like sitting where he always had. It didn't feel wrong. He sat there quietly, all the way home. Didn't think about much. Didn't need to. Some people pass through your life quietly, and even if they only speak once, they still stay with you. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this, we'd love to have you as a subscriber.